Hi everyone, welcome to this Provar Partner webinar on Salesforce test strategies. We're very pleased to be launching this new series where we'll be talking to Provar partners, sharing recent customer success stories and drawing out some tips and best practices that you can apply to your own testing projects. So we'll just start off with some introductions. My name is Hetty Borman-Weston and I'm Head of Marketing at Provar. Presenting with me today, I'm pleased to welcome my colleague Michael Daly, along with our guest presenter for this session, Alex Tenvolder from Nekst IT. If we take a little look at the agenda for this session, we'll be starting off with Alex, who will share a recent customer story with us around implementing Provar for a global chemicals company. As a part of that, he'll be sharing his experiences of using Provar and talking about the particular strategies he used to make sure the project met its goals and the test suite was built in a robust and maintainable way. After that, we'll hand over to Michael, who will give us a quick overview of the Provar solution and a demo that will hopefully bring to life some of the concepts and strategies that we use in Alex's project. So before we move on to the content then, just a quick thank you to Nekst IT for their help with this presentation. Nekst IT have been a Provar partner since 2017, and we've collaborated with them on a number of very successful projects. They are based in the Netherlands, and their consultants really have a deep knowledge of testing and of Salesforce. Do take a look at their website if you'd like to learn more about them. And yeah, thank you again to Nekst IT for your partnership with Provar and for helping us make this webinar possible today. So that's it from me. At this point, I will hand over to Alex to start us off on the presentation.
Hi. For the project where I was working for, we're using the Salesforce Sales Cloud with the Steelbrick CPQ extension, Einstein, Pardot, and the B2B community portal. 40% was customized in Salesforce, and we worked with 3 team members. 2 of them are focusing on functionality testing and integration testing. 1 member was responsible for setting up the test automation. Our goal was to reduce manual regression testing effort, also the regression testing time and the risk of regression. Also, we want to expand the frequency and the test coverage. I started with making a plan how I want to have my test set because I was the template, so someone else needs to take it over. So the test set must be easy to expand, easy to maintain, easy to collaborate with other users, and they need to know where to find it. Those points result in 2 questions. Do I want to use the same steps but with different output, and how can I keep it maintainable? In the next slides, I will show you how I implemented those 2 questions. Because I want to use the same steps for different scenarios, I used the following points. I created scalable test cases for objects and actions, like create opportunity, update opportunity, and add product for both front and back end. I also separate the test data from the steps. By separating the test data from the steps, you are more flexible, so you can do, for example, all fields or only the mandatory fields. Provar reference to Excel file with your test data. I also separate the type or status selection from the data or the test steps. You can give for example, the status you want ahead from your test case. By doing this, you can easily create, for example, different type of accounts with the same scalable test cases. When you are using different users, you can also set the user here by overriding the connection. And when you have scalable test cases and separate the data input, You can model the scenarios by giving the input you need for that scenario. When your test set is growing, it can be hard to maintain your set. So it's important to start at the beginning to think about maintaining your test set. It is easy to lose track if you start working with small components and you get more and more test scenarios. Structure is therefore very important. I have 3 tips that help me. The first one is I keep structure. In my project, I had a folder for the test scenarios per object, and I had a research folder per object, so it was easy to find. I keep it readable by changing the step name so you know what it does, and use group steps to help with it. I also set the test run variables per object. For example, I set a variable like account.name, account.phone. When you're looking through the test run, it's clear where you need to look instead of hundreds of lines of variables. I also use global variables. Some input data don't change too much, but when it changes, you don't want to go over all the test cases. So set the variables that's located under the test settings for the data that's not changing, like path of your test data Excel file. Did all result in less manual regression testing, 186 automatic test cases at the end, and every night an automatic regression test run using Git and Jenkins. It also was easier to expand and to collaborate with other users. And I'm now handing over to Michael.
Thank you, Alex. My name is Michael Daly, and I'm a DevOps consultant here at Provar. I'm going to go through a quick introduction into Provar as a company, and then I'll get into a hands-on demo of the product with a data-driven scenario. For those of you that are new to Provar, we were founded about 6 years ago in 2014 out of a platinum Salesforce consultancy. We have offices internationally, and our specialization is in Salesforce testing. The majority of our team here comes from a background in some form of QA, whether it be manual or automation-based testing. Our community is rapidly growing, and we have over 40 partners in the Salesforce ecosystem to date. When we say that we, Provar, are the #1 solution for testing Salesforce, what does this really translate to? Well, for starters, Provar is a test automation framework that is built with Salesforce users and testers in mind. We are metadata driven, which allows us to intelligently build and execute automation scripts with little to no coding knowledge required. Additionally, Provar has been designed to allow for easy maintainability and scalability with its plethora of built-in functions and reusable components. Perhaps the most important aspect here is that we are aligned with the Salesforce release roadmap. As most of you may be aware, Salesforce has 3 major releases each year that we get to look forward to, but also sweat about whether our applications will continue to function properly. As part of our alignment with Salesforce, we ensure ahead of time that Provar is fully compatible and in lockstep with whatever features or enhancements Salesforce is releasing. We also participate in 2 alpha pre-alpha testing programs with Salesforce, the BST and Monorail programs. In these programs, we assist Salesforce with testing some of their early changes before release is even pushed to the beta phase. In this way, we have access to some of the early development processes and achieve valuable insight from this partnership into Salesforce upcoming release changes. Provar also has a number of various different CI and CD solutions, which I'll elaborate more on in the next slide. So DevOps is definitely one of those buzzwords of the decade, and with so many different solutions to choose from and implement in your organization, you may want any additional tools to integrate to be compatible with your current tool set. Luckily, Provar is a natural fit into your continuous integration and continuous delivery pipeline. From the design phase to the reporting phase, Provar has integrations across the board. From release management within Salesforce to version control for your test projects using things like Git, to continuous integration for running your test cases based on either an automated trigger or a scheduled build. And we also provide valuable and insightful reporting on test results using your chosen reporting tool. Overall, our goal here is to ensure that the onboarding of Provar within your organization is seamless and easily scalable. Okay, now I'm going to jump into Provar and demonstrate a scenario that will showcase Provar's scalability, reusability, and its native support for some commonly used Salesforce features. First, I want to take a look at a spreadsheet that I have for this particular test case. This spreadsheet that you see here is going to illustrate one of the core concepts of test automation, called data-driven testing. So what we want to do here is use this spreadsheet to create data for our test case ahead of time, so that we don't have to rely on any pre-existing data as part of our testing process. This particular spreadsheet just has a list of accounts in rows with the account name, phone, type, and employee fields filled in. We have some variation here to create some different account records, so that way we're using some different data for our testing. Now I'm going to jump into Provar and show you how I'm utilizing this spreadsheet and what I'm doing with the data that I'm populating it with. So here on the right side of my screen, you see Provar Test Builder. This is our Chrome extension that allows us to build out and maintain our test cases in the browser using a UI. Now on the left side of my screen is the UI that you're all familiar with, the Salesforce application here that I'm working in. It's from the Salesforce sample gallery, Visualforce to LWC. Now so far all that I've done is I've created a setup test case, which in Provar we have the concept of setup test cases, which will allow you to create test data for you to use for your test cases before they run. This is a good way to use the data-driven testing. And this is also what I'm doing here to read in my account data and then create some records using the API. So far, all that I've done is I've created some 10 account records in this particular org using that approach. So you can see here all the accounts that I've created. Now the only thing that I've changed is I've added a unique identifier to the end of each of the account names to make sure I'm creating some unique records each time. So from here, I'm going to resume to jump into the actual test case. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to run a SQL query to select an account from the list that we just created. What Provar will do is that it will refresh the page to make sure I'm on the correct screen before it begins executing. Now it's going to set the search to integration test to find one of those accounts that I just created using the API. Okay, so we've selected one of our accounts here. So this particular page is very interesting because we have the concept of these wrappers here, which all have Visualforce components as well as Lightning Web components built into the wrappers. On the left side of each of the wrapper, you'll see the Visualforce component, and on the right side, you'll see the Lightning Web component. So this is useful for your integration testing in case you're wanting to test that Provar can automate both scenarios before you do your migration. So the scenario that I'm going to be working through is I'm going to be editing some of these account record fields, and then I'm going to be verifying it in the other component. So firstly, we're going to step through here, and we're just going to have some basic assertions. So following some more best practices, we've named our assertions accordingly. So rather than just saying UI assert, we've clarified that we're actually asserting the account name, and we're doing the account name on the Visualforce component. Great. We're also going to assert the account name on the Lightning Web component in the same edit record wrapper. Again, all the data that I'm using here is populated either from the spreadsheet that I showed you in the beginning or from the SQL query to retrieve all of our account records. Now what we're going to do is we're going to alter the type pick list in the Visualforce component, save it, and then we're going to verify it in the Lightning Web component. Okay, so the type pick list has been changed. So now we're going to continue on to save this record. Now, of course, what you first notice is that the account type does not get immediately updated. You'll see it updated here as prospect, but in the Lightning Web Component, it still shows the original value as other. So we have the concept of a refresh inside of Provar, which is pretty handy in this particular use case. So what I've done to add a refresh to my test case is we have the test palette here with a number of different functions. If you go to the test palette and you scroll down to UI, you'll have the option here for UI Navigate. Now, if you click on that, the default option is to refresh the page. You also have an additional option here to take a screenshot before and after you refresh the page. So I'm going to step forward once more, and it's going to refresh that page, and we should see the account type update now in the Lightning Web Component. So some more validation, I'm going to assert that the type has been updated in the Lightning Web Component. Now what we're going to do is we're going to alter one of the records in the Lightning Web Component and then verify it in the Visualforce component. So we're going to change the employees field and then save the record. Now what you'll notice here is that the employees has been updated in both Lightning Web Components in the view record wrapper and the edit record wrapper. However, the employees still show the original value in both of the Visualforce components. So again, we're going to have a refresh. Once we have refreshed the page, we now see the proper value has been updated. So we're going to add another validation to make sure that the employees has the same count there for the Visualforce component. Perfect. Now we're going to jump into this other wrapper here, the view record wrapper. So what I want to do here is I want to go in and assert the employee count on the Lightning Web Component. We'll see that also is verified. So we're just checking it in multiple places to make sure that everything is in sync here. And then we're going to have another edit here to alter the account phone in the Lightning Web Component. So we'll see the value has been changed. Once we click the Save button, we should see the value reflected in both Lightning Web Components. So it's slightly different behavior when you're working with LWC versus Visualforce pages, is that you will see those update on the fly without any refresh. So we're going to continue on, and we're going to make sure that that phone number is valid in both the Lightning Web Component in the view record wrapper and the Visualforce component in the view record wrapper. And again, once we've asserted it in the Lightning Web Component, we want to refresh the page to make sure the phone the field here has been updated before we run our validation. So after a refresh, we see the correct value has now been populated. And so this assertion will pass. Perfect. So now everything I've shown you so far has been pre-built. Everything I've done is I've added all of my steps ahead of time to showcase how we could work with Visualforce pages and Lightning Web Components in the same test case, in the same application. What if I'm doing something on the fly? So down here in the bottom right, we have a create record wrapper that I want to illustrate our compatibility with Lightning Web Components. So here I want to create a new account using the Lightning Web Component side of this particular wrapper. So I'm going to right click on the account name and add it to my test case. So a quick note about working with Lightning Web Components in general and inside of Provar, you'll notice that the default locator a lot of times will give you a little bit of a duplicate. So if we use the label here, we see that we actually have 4 matches on the page. So this will not be sufficient. So if we try instead to use one of the XPaths, we've narrowed it down now to 2 different elements. But we want to get even more precise than that. We only want to interact with this specific element. So Provar actually has the concept of a JavaScript locator custom built for Lightning Web Components. So this will correctly identify the element we want to interact with. From here, I'm going to set the name of this particular account, just fill in a dummy value here, and I'll click Add and Do. So after our page refresh, just to make sure we're on the correct page, we do see the account name has been updated there. So now I'm going to go ahead and add an employee value here as well. Again, we don't want to use the label because we do see duplicate matches on the page. And if we switch to the XPath, again, we see 2 matches on the page. So once again, we're going to use this JavaScript locator that we have provided in Provar to correctly identify this field in this Lightning Web Component. So I'll populate an employee value here. Perfect. Now from here, we don't have any other required fields, so I'm going to right click on the Save button and add that to my test case. Now you'll notice the Save button only has 2 matches on the page because we only have 2 possibilities for that label. So for here, we're actually going to switch over to the XPath, and again, we notice 2 matches. However, if we use the first XPath recommended by Provar, we do see we have a correct match on one particular element on the page. So we do not have to use a JavaScript locator in this particular case. So here I'm going to add a screenshot to create this account record. And I'll click Add and Do. Great. So we see that the record has been created. Because of this particular page, it does not navigate me to the account record by default, but we can trust that the record has been created by verifying it on the accounts page once more. If we go back here, we can see the first record here is integration test 123. Okay, so let's recap. So first, we set up our test case using a data-driven approach. We put all of our test data into an Excel spreadsheet, and then we populated that with rows of different account records. And then we read from that and created accounts in Salesforce based on the data inside of that spreadsheet. Next, we used a SQL query to retrieve the created records. Now, one of these records is going to be used as our test account. It's selected randomly from the list. Next, we edited the account record on the Visualforce component of the edit record wrapper, and then we verified the results in the Lightning Web component. Then we performed the similar steps to edit the account record in the Lightning Web component and verify the results in the Visualforce component. And then second to last, we created an account record in the Lightning Web component on the create record wrapper. And we verified that the account was created manually. And then finally, something that we didn't cover is that there's actually a really critical part of the data-driven approach here. The data cleanup was performed automatically by Provar, meaning all the account records that we created as part of that test case, once the test case is complete, will be completely done away with in that particular org. So that way, each time you run this test case, you're starting with a clean slate. And for now, I will turn it back over to Hetty.
Great, thanks, Michael. So we're going to be going into our Q&A shortly. So if you would like to put a question to any one of our presenters today, then you're very welcome to do so. The best way to ask a question is to go ahead and type it out into the questions box. But a final point from me before we get to the Q&A, there are a few more learning resources put up on this slide that might be of interest. Feel free to take a screenshot if you want to follow up with any of them, as we'll be moving slides shortly. But in particular, I just wanted to highlight the latest white paper that we've produced, which is around the challenges of end-to-end testing in the cloud. So do take a look at that link, which is up on screen now, if that's of interest. Okay, so the final thing to mention from me is, as I said earlier, we have been recording this session, and I'll send everyone an email tomorrow containing that video recording, and then you're welcome to watch it again or share it with anyone else in your team. So that's it from us. I'd like to say thank you again to our presenters today, Alex and Michael, and thank you to all of you for attending. Goodbye.